were very curious to me. And I'm speaking not as a regular citizen, I'm speaking as an insider. I was a chemical dependency counselor for 11 years. I worked in the prison. I worked in inpatient and outpatient for both adult and children. And I worked also in a newly formed family dependency court, family chemical dependency court that happened in Olympia and Tacoma. So I wasn't just a kid off the block as I began to experience some tragedy in my family, and then also began to sit through the court and listen to what they were doing with my family. And then I was also experiencing some agency distress and some very questionable behaviors from the agency. And as a result of that, I began to investigate. And I began to research civil law, and I began to research the policies and procedures locally, federally, until I became quite obsessed with it. There was 7 days a week from the time I woke up in the morning to the time I went to bed at night. I was on that computer, still am. 4 years later, I have probably one of the highest, as far as being a citizen is concerned, I probably have one of the highest knowledge bases in the country in terms of having a well-rounded knowledge of what this system is all about. And so, because of the tragedy of my family, which is now over and done with, my grandchildren were adopted out, I'm still continuing to be involved in activism, lobbying. I do lobbying in Washington State, and I still have some real concerns about the direction of the country. Now, most of you sitting here are right in the throngs of, or maybe have completed throngs of Child Protective Systems actions. However, there's some transitions in the works, and I'm just kind of sitting back waiting to see what those transitions are going to encompass. I'm seeing bills coming through. Those bills are not real specific, and so how that's all going to play itself out, I'm not sure, with the opening of the funding for family preservation in 28 states. Now, originally, they were only going to do 10 states where they were going to open up the funding, and myself and a few others threw quite a large fit about that, and so they increased it up to 28. And as a result of that, we have now 28 states that have the option and the opportunity to use the funding creatively to keep children with their families. I'm hoping that this new funding that's opening up will make some drastic changes. But unless we are actively involved in those changes, they're going to do what they want to do. The choices that they are going to make are they're going to make. So we have to figure out how to become insiders in a way that's going to affect these changes. Now, one of the problems that they had with taking an insider and doing some of the things with an insider that they did in my case is bending over an insider is kind of like a real messy divorce, because insiders know you, and they know how you operate, and they know what you do. They know what your strengths are, they know what your weaknesses are, and they know how to interpret events. For example, as I began to order records, I started looking at documentation. Now, I was a very good documenter. I understood the legalities of how to document. And so as I began to look at documentation from doctors, other stakeholders, I began to see a pattern of really shoddy, poor documentation practices. And so if you get some misinformation from over in this agency, and then you get a little misinformation from this agency over here, and then another, and you put all that information and collect it together and put it into a file, you now have a picture of a family that looks nothing like that family. And that's what's happening in case after case after case. And so as you go into a courtroom, a picture has been painted, and if you object to that picture, you don't get heard. And that's a problem. And many of you, as a matter of fact, I think just about everybody who contacts me and asks me for help falls in this category of misinformation. And not everybody, of course, is being lied about. I mean, sometimes the truth really is the truth. But we have no recourse, and that's been the issue for us with the judiciary and with all the agencies. As we begin to seek our redress of grievances, we find roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, whether it's constituent services, whether it's the ombudsman, whether it's the agency itself, and last but not least, the courtroom. So it is with the judiciary that I focus my attention, because we can scream at CPS all day long and not get anywhere. We have to really take a look at the judiciary and what the decision-making process is there. How are they making their court rules? So, how many of you know, for example, that you can be involved in the process of making court rules? That you can actually have input? How many of you know that you can do that?
Thought we did.
Okay, how many of you have done it?
Oh, by voting? Is that what you mean?
No, you don't have to vote. Okay? Because I found the court rules to be pretty biased at times for the prosecution. Okay? Does that mean you have to put up with that? No. Because what they generally do is there's a process and a time element where they open up that information to the general public, but it's deeply hidden. And oftentimes you're not going to find it. You have to look for it. You have to know where to find it, and you have to ask the right questions. So, in my case, as an insider, I look at documentation. Because of the psychological background, I can assess assessments. For example, psychological assessments. I can assess chemical dependency assessments, and I've been collecting them. Why am I collecting them? I'm collecting them because I'm developing a database of people who are being falsely misrepresented in a court of law using psychology. So, as we are beginning the process of change, we have to learn their language. We have to learn how to approach the system in a way that's going to affect change. And I don't think we've been doing that very well. I think we've been whining and complaining. And what I had to learn to do when I went before the legislator is provide solutions. I had to get real solution focused. They listen to people whining all day long without a solution. So we have to come up with solutions, just like we have to come up with solutions or provide input to the judiciary. Now, how can we get involved with the judiciary and provide input? Well, I'm going to ask him to answer that question here in a little while, because I think between the victims of the system and the judiciary, there's a huge gap where we can't just sit down at the table and really say, you know, this is how the decisions that the judiciary are making has affected my family. You know, there's a gap of information there, and yet I think it's a critically important piece of information. One of the new things that's come up, for example, is legal abuse. How many of you are familiar with that term? Okay. What is it? Can you tell me what legal abuse is?
When they play with the law, this is my experience, when they play with the law to benefit them, and they use it to their advantage, the certain laws and stuff. That's been my experience.
Legal abuse is a new term that they're trying to put into the DSM-IV. It deals with having gone through a traumatic event with the legal system, so much so that you have a type of post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay? And so a lot of us sitting here have experienced that. But do they really understand what that means? It's just kind of coming into vogue right now. And yet it's affected so many of us. It causes depression, it causes mood swings, it causes the inability sometimes to control our emotions. We're either underreacting or overreacting to things under post-traumatic stress disorder. And then you lose your ability to feel the same way about your country. Now, I'm also a U.S. Air Force veteran, and I'm here to tell you, as patriotic as I have been in my life as an Air Force veteran, it has really clouded my feelings about my country. And this is a common feeling behind those who are going through this battle with the legal system. So, I want to talk a little bit about them as humans. Because the people that we're going to and complaining to are very, very human. And they have their own issues and they have their own lives. And as an insider, I'm going to give you one example of something that I experienced and saw. And that is, we went to San Diego for a conference on the development of family dependency court, chemical dependency court. And we were looking at another system that was going on down there in San Diego, and all kinds of high-powered folks went. And that included the Attorney General at that particular time. It included people from the City Council, Juvenile Court, it included judges, lawyers, supervisors that existed within the family court system as stakeholders, etc. And as we all went down there, we would spend the day looking at their various different programs, and then at night they wanted to discuss their findings. And they wanted to do it in the bar. Okay? So we're sitting there in the bar, and I didn't drink. So we're sitting in the bar, and I'm watching these other people drink, and keep in mind that I'm a chemical dependency counselor. Okay? And so I'm looking at this person working in juvenile court, thinking, I'd put that one in treatment. And then I'm looking at the head of attorney division. I'm trying to be selective in my words. I'm looking at the head of an attorney division who put away at least a fifth. At least. Shot after shot after shot. And then there's at least two that couldn't walk out the door. They had to be carried. And I just watched one after another. There was at least 5 of them I would have put in outpatient, and at least another 3 of them I would have put in inpatient. So what we have is we have an addictive population, a certain percentage of an addicted population who is making decisions about policy and procedures that affect our lives. So as they are sitting there getting schlossed out of their mind, they're talking about everybody else's chemical dependency problems and what needed to be done to fix their lives. I'm saying, hello, let's start having some accountability with yours. Okay, so we're looking at each other, we're eyeballing each other, because we've got this group saying, well, you know, you need to live better. And I'm looking at them and saying, well, let's talk about your life too. Let's all live better, okay? Let's all live better. So it's not that we want to necessarily go after the people who have harmed us as much as we want to fix the problems, be able to see our children, grandchildren, and make it a better world for those who come after us and get involved in the legal and child protection system. Now, from a psychological point of view, I have some real problems with how psychology is being used in our court system. Some huge problems with how it's being used, in the sense that it is an abstract art, it's not an absolute, but it's being used as a prosecution tool. And as a result of that psychology being used as a prosecution tool, if someone wants to get you, they can do it, and all they have to do is say you're crazy, or you're a little bit depressed, or you're, you know, a little bit bipolar. And everybody, and I hate to tell you this, there's not a single person in this room that is not bipolar. I know that might surprise some of you, but if you start looking at the definitions of bipolar disorder,
Life has ups and downs.
have any of you had an up? Have any of you had a down? If you have, you are bipolar. Okay? So it's become a type of entrapment. And we want our voices to be heard, and we want our pain to be realized and recognized and validated. And we want changes to happen as we're moving forward with our activism and our lobbying. Okay. So, we have with us Judge Frank Sullivan. I had a lot of trouble finding information about you online.
No one else seems to. Good and bad.
And, but I did manage, actually Walter helped me out with finding something on the National Council website, talking about that you started in 2008, you had started a bunch of specialty courts here in Las Vegas. And so that was no small task, I'm sure. And then move forward with that. I'm not sure where that's gone here in Las Vegas or what changes you hope to create. I understand you're in the 9th District Court now.
8th District.
8th District Court. Okay, so you're now still a judge in the 8th. Okay. And I'm also understanding that you're doing some activism and some interest in some change within the court system as well. So if you could address some of the things, the positive things that you're doing to make those changes happen. How do you perceive populations? How do you perceive parenting? And let's see, what else did I have in here? Well, anything else you think is pertinent. He's only going to be here for about 20 minutes. And then we also have with us today Denise Tanada Ashley. She's also an attorney. Is that correct?
I went to law school.
Okay.
I don't practice.
She is the Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Alliance. She's also the former Executive Director of the Nevada Institute for Children's Research and Policy. So she's one of the big ones in terms of, in this area, in terms of the understanding of children's issues. And so what we'd be interested in hearing from you is what changes would you like to see happen in the Children's Protective Division, #1, and also what things are you doing to make those changes happen, and anything else important? You had a question?
No, not a question. I would just like to make a comment to the people because, yeah, parents think of things from the way things happen from their family, how they feel, their emotions, etc. But, I'm speaking about Judge Sullivan here, is that no one will ever hear anything about something good he has probably ever done, once maybe in a blue moon. Advocacy, only hears, if somebody has a complaint about the judge. So that does, just because you've heard something does not mean, he's not a good judge. It's just that, out of a zillion cases he hears, we only hear about, the disgruntled ones, because happy people just kind of like go and keep living the way they want to live, like everybody else wants to live, and don't get to because they have to fix what they weren't happy with, whatever happened in the court. So just because you hear something bad about, a particular judge does not make it all bad. It's just that we only hear about the disgruntled parents, just so you know.
It's the rumor tree.
Just, in his defense, that doesn't make him a bad judge just because you've heard it, through the rumor mill a few things. I just want to make that clear. And that doesn't just pertain to Judge Sullivan, that pertains to all judges.
Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
I think, first of all, we have to realize that the system doesn't do a good job raising children. And anyone knows that or should know that. Children were meant to be raised in homes, in loving homes. And what happens is that, healthy families mean you have a stronger community. The issue is how do you get there? And I think what you need to look for, #1, is, Janet said, know your judge. Family court judges, in my opinion, are the most important judges that you're ever going to do. And very few people know they're family court judges when they vote. When people vote, they vote by name. They have no idea about that judge. And rumor mills or whatever, ask people who've appeared in front of that judge. Ask attorneys, ask families what they felt they were heard. And do your homework when you vote, because we get people that get elected that should be elected, but it happens to the legislators as well. So do your homework and know. As far as what happens in the child welfare system, I'll give you some statistics so you get an idea what happens in Clark County. All right, just to get an overview, to give you an idea how massive the system is. They receive 1,700 calls on a community hotline a month. That's on average. Calls of alleged abuse and neglect. They also get another 1,000 on their back emergency. That would be from schools that have another hotline, police. So you're talking about getting 2,700 calls average on a month in Clark County, Nevada, someone reporting abuse, alleged abuse and neglect. So put that in perspective. Out of that, they do about 800 investigations. So you're looking about 2,700 and maybe 800, so about a third actually they feel reach the criteria of investigation because they got certain criteria. You know, does the complaint have allegations of abuse and neglect? Is it alleged of a caregiver abuse and neglect? Does it qualify as abuse and neglect? The severity, things like that. Out of that, they substantiate about 162. So you figure you got about 2,700 calls, about 162 substantiated by the department. Now, that doesn't mean those are all going to come to court. They can do deferential response. When you get out there and say this does not go up the level of court intervention and try to defer those out of the court. What happens, we seem to be too reactive. We got no proactive. We don't have a lot of education out there to help families before it gets at crisis level. And what we're trying to do now, at least under my leadership, and I'm accountable, I'll make it right now. When you come to Clark County, child abuse and neglect, the buck stops with me. And as far as innuendos about my reputation, check my reputation. All right? Find out about me, and I'll stand with my community. I've had people in front of me ask on that, find out, so I'm not so sure, so I'm not defensive at all. Do your homework, know the people, know the judges, the good, the bad. We handle, as far as cases, we get cases all across. About 70% of our cases, we have about 3,400 children in the system at any time. In Clark County, Nevada, 900 are in parental placements. And in fact, I get monthly reports to check out the issues on that. Out of the 900 in parental placements, we have about another 1,400 that are in relative placements. That's with grandparents mostly, or aunts or uncles. So about 70% of the children that are in the system are either with parents or with family. If you add fictive kins, that means family, that friends of know the family, they're not related, but they're like family, people consider family. About 80% of the placements, at least in Clark County, are then in a relative/fictive kin. Good or bad? It depends. You look at it. The issue is, can you keep these families together from day one? And it's all about safety. With safety, well-being, and permanency. And what we don't do a good job is at that beginning. Does that family need to be in the system? What is the safety factors? Why can't that child stay with the family? Mom's doing drugs. That doesn't mean that child's got to be removed. You have to look at the vulnerability of the child, the emergency, the immediacy of harm, the severity of the harm, to protect the capacity of the parent, to protect the capacity of the child. And what a tendency is to look at the behavior of the parent and not necessarily tie that into the maltreatment. And the only burden, the level for the law is a parent minimally competent. You don't have to be a great parent. You don't have to be a good parent. You have to be a minimally competent parent. That means you're not rendering a child to abuse and neglect. Our cases come in 70%, 72% are neglect. About 28% are abuse. Out of that, you'll have about 18, maybe 20% physical abuse, 8% sexual abuse, and 75% neglect. Out of those neglect cases, 2/3 of those cases will be drug-related. So the issues we're trying to focus on is our treatment course, our therapeutic course, our dependency course. We got a drug issue. Let's treat this as a community. What is the problems? How can we help this family? What we're trying to do is get off that litigation. You use the word prosecution. And that's part of the problem with our system. Even though it's family court, these are civil proceedings, it looks like a criminal case. The family does look like they're being prosecuted. They get a petition saying you're an abusive parent, right? We got the attorneys on that, and the DA, district attorney, who's civil, puts a lot of things in a petition that may not need to be in the petition. They had a domestic violence 10 years ago. So what? What does it have to do with where we're at today? They had a DUI 8 years ago. So what? Where are we at today? So you get a lot of stuff in that petition that starts painting the family a certain way that's had nothing to do with the current situation or safety. My courtroom under due process, I appoint an attorney for every parent. The issue with that is, do those attorneys have the right training? Today, I understand on that. And what happens, it looks like a criminal case. You get the DA on one side, you get the family attorneys denying everything, and then we go to litigation, right? And then they want to play the legal things. I need a continuation. But what happens, that's not good for families. That is not child focus. That is not family focus. What I'm trying to do with our partners in our community, and Ms. Melody is one of our great leaders in the community, is saying, can we change that focus to the front end? Sit down, get the family engaged, family supportive. I don't need to tell Jan what she needs with her family. We need to sit there, tell us what you need. Empower the family to do it, and you can't do it in our existing system. If you get a petition, say you're a bad parent, right, and you got a DA on one side and your attorney saying don't tell anything, don't tell the department, you got a problem with drugs, so they're going to use it against you. And they're going to stay that way because it looks like litigation. I'm trying to change from litigation to mediation. Family-driven, family supportive. There's a lot of barriers in that. Because not a lot of people necessarily agree with me because they're lawyers. That's how they're trained. They're not trained in mediation, they're trained to litigate. And what we're trying to do is shift that. So we're trying to do, I won't see a child unless the child's been removed. They won't come to court unless they're left with an out-offending parent. Let's say it was a sexual abuse case and they found that the mother was, or father was protective, and they do a direct case to me, so those kids would be in a home. But most of the cases coming in front of me, the child's already been removed by the department. And then I look at it and say, wait a minute, why was that child removed? What reasonable efforts did you make to keep that family home? What is the immediate safety factor? How can you mitigate that safety factor? And what service can we do to help the family? But what happens is you get litigation, I don't get a lot of information in court because the attorneys are telling their clients, dumb me up. Don't say anything in court because it might be used against you, and I respect that, but that's the wrong focus. So what I'm trying to do now in these cases, I said, you know what, I'm referring you to mediation, to the team. And it's not going to be at court, because that's not a neutral playing field. It's going to be our neighborhood resource centers. We have north, south, east, west, and central geographic areas, family resource centers. So I have our family resource centers with a mediator sitting there and say, we're going to have the team there. The family comes with anybody who support. I had one family show up, they said, with 28 people. That's great. I mean, sad sometimes they don't have support, especially in Nevada, because a lot of families are on their own here. But we have them come with their family support, their system, their pastor, whoever, basketball coaches, whoever's involved in that family's life, and sit down and we have the service provider. What services can we get you hooked into? What do you need? How can we help you to try to break down that defensive or criminal prosecution? To get family-driven, family-engaged, family-supportive, family empowerment. Is everyone open to that? Not necessarily. Should every parent have their child? Absolutely not. Some people never should have had children to begin with. But the issue is not just not removing children. Make sure you only remove the children that have to be removed. Children suffer psychological damage by being removed from their family. Even if they've been removed the day before and I say, no, those kids go home tomorrow, they've been damaged. The psychological damage has already been done. The issue, can we avoid that? And the real issue is get the family engaged. What happens now, caseworkers are very overloaded. They come there, they do a child and family team meeting. It's not a child and family team meeting because you're not engaged. The family's not engaged. You're being told, here's what you need to get your child back. And here's your case plan. You're not part of that case plan. You're not sitting and saying, wait a minute, where's that coming from? So the whole issue is to change the whole mindset, the whole culture. Is that going to happen tomorrow? No. You got to educate judges. You got to educate the attorneys. You got to educate CPS. You got to educate the therapists. I mean, there's a lot of things that come in there. So just training becomes an issue and really getting out in the community. What we're trying to do is reach out to the community. And I bet you if you looked around on that, when I offered all the judges at the national conference, they'd like to come with me tonight. They told me, you an idiot, Sullivan? How are you stepping into it? I said, I'm not the smartest judge. You can ask Miss Melly to me well enough. And Denise knows I'm not the smartest judge you run into, but I'm not an idiot. The issue is to come out there and talk to the communities, to the people that have been in the system. You know it. You were in the system. Those who need to help, let's change the system. Are there evil people or unethical people in the system? Sure. There's unethical lawyers, there's unethical judges, there's unethical teachers, there's unethical truck drivers. I mean, you have that in any population. The issue is the people that have been in that system see it from unique eyes, and we don't get that input. We have teams, as you ask how to get involved. We've got teams from the community that we come out there, that we reach out to. We've reached out with black pastors. We just came one of our recently, pastor, right? Was one of our reverends in the back? I think I just was introduced.
Pastor?
Yeah, he's from the Black Caucus.
For the Black Caucus, so we kind of reach out
Same thing.
and see our children out there, because we have 30% of children in our system in Clark County are African American. That's disproportionality. We're only 10.5% of our population in Clark County is African American, so you got a 3-to-1 ratio. There's something wrong there. Is it racism? Could be. Is it implicit bias? Could be. Is it social economic poverty? If you don't think poverty impacts what happens to you in life, you're in a dream world. The issue is, can you distinguish that? For example, I can petition now to say lack of resources. How is that neglect or abuse? How is lack of resources? That's not the issue. So I throw those out all the time. Say, that's not the issue. The issue might be they lack resources because they're heavy-duty meth addiction, right? They're going out there and leaving the kids alone and disappearing for days doing meth. The issue is not lack of resources. It's substance abuse. And the maltreatment is they're leaving these young kids unsupervised. Well, address that issue. Don't sit there and say you need a job, you need stable housing. That's not the issue. The issue is substance abuse. Focus on that issue and not overwhelm the family. So really trying to get there and get really meaningful case plans. And can you keep those kids home from day one? And that's what we focus on, family preservation. Because you keep the family together, healthy families, and if you do it right, I've done my drug court when the courts I started was dependency. Drug court, if you do it right, you got the parents hugging you afterwards. You got the parents hugging the attorneys, hugging the judge sometimes. Can I come up with hug a judge? And sometimes they're spitting in your face. I understand that as well. But the issue, if you do it right, the family feels that you helped them and they got hurt. And you tell them what you have to do on that. But the issue is really fast-tracking that. Can you keep those kids home? If not, what needs to happen to get those kids home? And if those kids can't go home, then how do you get permanency? So they don't sit in the foster care system for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, because that's not healthy. That's damaging to those children. And that's what you really have to do, but you really got to focus on that family preservation. At least that's what I believe. Can you keep those families strong? Can you address their needs while keeping that child safe? If you can't, how can you do it? We have kids, we get grandparents. Can the grandparents come in and help out? What's the situation? The parent gets drunk on the weekends. Well, we're going to assess that situation. If they're fine during the week, you got no safety thing during the week, so what happens on weekends? Maybe grandma can come in. You can do some alternatives to that to say, wait a minute, we can address the issue while they're getting help if they have the problem. But you got to tie it into the maltreatment. And that's what we're really trying to look at. Domestic violence, 58% of our cases have domestic violence in there. Why would you sit there and take a child away from a parent who's getting beat up? That parent's a victim, a survivor of DV, and what are we doing? We're re-victimizing that victim, right? Why? They don't get it. CPS workers, they're not trained in domestic violence. I was a domestic violence judge. What I did is we had DV advocates. Andre Agassi, the tennis player, gave us a grant for a year so we could hire DV advocates to go out with CPS investigators when there was domestic violence because they didn't understand it. When that went away, now we're at the back curve again, that they don't get it with DV. And so what has this person done? How have they maltreated their kid? They got the help beat out of them. Why don't you help them? You don't take their kids away from them for getting beat up. You help them. You sit there and say, here's a situation. How can I keep the child and you safe? So we try to get that focus, but a lot of that is a lack of understanding. And as part of training and communication, judges train on DV and things like that we're really doing. But the focus has to be on family preservation. Can you keep those children home safely? And it's safety, 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 and they got to be able to articulate what the safety is. How can you mitigate that safety, and why you can't do it? So the one question every judge has to ask, why can't the children go home now? And the department has to think about it. Then those kids probably belong home. The department has to say, well, let me think about it. The kids probably be learn home and get the services. We have a lack of services for parents. If they got substance abuse, they may be on a waiting list to get engaged in services. The state will pay for the children, Medicaid. The parents don't have that. So the parents have those barriers. Transportation in Las Vegas, you can't get around. Child care, housing, if you need counseling, can you afford it? We have very limited people that can do it on sliding scales are free, so we have resources, so we are mapping. We are finished up with a group that Denise is familiar with, the Courts Catalyzing Change, to address disproportionality. We reach out to our pastors, our faith base, and say, can you guys step up there and ladies help us out with the community? It's our children, how can we address that from the system? And we're trying to partner with them. Can they be visitation centers? The kids are at home. Can they visit within their communities? Have those children with the faith-based, non-faith-based? Could they get mentors for the parents? If the parents got someone, not a lawyer, but someone who can help them in the system, be that support for that family. Give that family support that don't have it, and have the community come forward. So I think it's real important for this group to come forward. talk to the judges myself, other ones, what are the holes that you see? How you think we can do it? And you gotta make sure you do your message in the right way, because if you come on too negative, people are afraid of you. So they don't open up, they don't give you their, and I was honest. I told the judges I was coming here at the convention, and they said, the ones that protest, I said, yeah. They said, well, why would you go there? And I said, why wouldn't we? To hear what you have to say, to open that dialogue up, because that's part of the way you do it, and that's what we're trying to do with Denise, go out there and talk to communities, get involved, and tell us what we can do, and, you know, take the hits with that. Have I done every case right? No. Have I done every case I think was best for that child? Absolutely. Absolutely. Have they all turned out the right way? Absolutely not, never will. If you're in a dependency judge, you do for more years. I've been on the bench for 12 years. I've been a domestic violence judge, a juvenile justice judge, child abuse and neglect judge, child support judge, discovery. I've done every gambit of it. So it helps you out when you get through that. But the issue is solutions too. Not just raising concerns, but come with solutions. People come to me all the time and they complain or they bitch. But I said, come with solutions. Help solutions. You wait for me to fix it, ain't gonna happen. You wait for DFS, ain't gonna happen. You wait for the attorneys, ain't gonna happen. It's us. It's our kids, our community, and it's our responsibility that every child should be raised in a safe, loving, nurturing home.
Well,
Hopefully that can be with their parents. Some can't be.
everybody's responsibility.
Yeah,
It is.
absolutely.
Yeah, the
Everybody.
communities, but I think a huge solution would be to cut funding.
Yeah.
There's just way too much funding going into it, and the incentive is to remove children and keep them in the system, not to keep them with the families. That's not the financial incentive swings that the other way. But it's not the judicial's responsibility, it's the community's responsibility, it's the parents' responsibility. And it's society's responsibility to keep families together. Sorry to.
No, I agree. It's absolutely. We want to be a dialogue, not be, lecturing you guys.
I think if the funding was put towards helping the parents being trained to do what they need to do, it would be a lot better than being put where it's allocated at this time.
Okay.
Because there's there's no book that says this is how you raise your child, And if there's training for people out there that are having issues with their kids that can't control their kids, if they're taught different ways of handling that, and that money's used for that, I think that's a whole lot better way to go.
Preventive. We do very little preventive.
Right.
We're all reactive. We're not, so that we're trying to hope with our mediation, since it's a neighborhood resource, that you're hooked up with the community resources so you don't need to be in the system. So if you got those issues, you know where to go. So I know to get those services, even if we're involved and after involved, or even before that, so you really connect with your neighborhood resource center, with your community, not with the court.
Exactly.
To try to keep you out of the system, because the system doesn't do a good
Because
job.
you're gonna take it a whole lot better from somebody that's not a court person
Right.
than you are, if you're shoved in front of a court, it's just gonna be like,
Well, you're scared to death. I mean, I go to court and you forget when you're a judge. Once a week, I come in the front doors of my courtroom just to remember how it's like, because you sit up there, and the reason it's up there is to intimidate.
Right.
So they want people to follow the rules of the judge, because we told the judge, the hell with you, we couldn't send everybody in jail who wouldn't listen to orders, right? So all this, so it's set up that way, so it's not a nice, conducive, family-friendly situation. You're absolutely right on that. We need to put that preventive, and we put the money in Medicaid, the kids will get it, but we won't do it for the parents.
That's right.
So they don't have resources on that, and you're trying to get resources, you say it's backwards, but you're right, and we don't do enough preventive at all and help the families, and it needs to be helped. The families need to see it as the system's helping them, not that we're taking their babies. And right now, the perception, rightfully or wrongfully, is that we're just there to take your babies.
right, you're just being mean, you're.
Taking your babies, we
Right.
just start taking your babies. And
Right.
whether it's right or wrong, that's perception.
Right.
That's the reality of people on that, and we need to do that. And the public official like myself need to be held accountable. I agree with
You
that
bet.
100%. I agree with
bet.
that 100%.
I would like to add one thing to that Judge Sullivan does not make the rules on how much money goes where. He does the job he's hired to do. I'm not standing here defending or,
Oh, no, I wasn't pointing fingers at him either, so.
everyone knows, it's the Congress and, the different laws we have.
Right.
The judge,
You're
the judge
right.
here, just as the rest of the judge, are living and doing the job that they're paid to do.
Correct.
They have nothing to do with where the money goes, how it's getting there.
Right,
They're only
doing their job.
doing the job that they are paid to do. It has nothing to do with,
You bet.
how the money gets there, how it's spent. He has nothing to do with that. And I'm
You
not
bet.
standing here defending him.
No, I
cetera.
understand where you're coming from.
But just so you know, that
Oh, yeah.
he doesn't make the rules, he has no control
Yeah, no,
over.
that's not anything I intended at all, so no. I
But we
understand.
do in some ways. I mean, I talked to the legislator right now. I'll be talking to them on April 4th again about psychotropic medications. We are medicating our kids to death.
Oh,
You know?
yeah.
And they're on the psychotropic medications. If you look nationwide, is the psychotropic medications, children and child welfare system are on psychotropic medications 35%, 1 out of 3. Exactly. General population is less than 8% of children on psychotropic. And you got 35 in the child welfare system, and if you look at those ones that are on, kids in child welfare system, over 50% are on 2 or more.
You bet.
So there's a serious issue there on these drugs, and we're starting.
That trauma from being removed, and automatically,
They get on.
instantly become a
Right.
$6,000 bonus.
And that
child.
makes an addiction person, and it's another addicted person, and it's a vicious circle.
And what happens to that child? These medications have not been tested in great detail on children. I don't know the long-term effects on these children when they're on those drugs, and I've seen them as young as 8 years old on psychotropic medication. I said, that's ridiculous. We're trying to get our hand around that.
3.
Yeah,
I've
three?
seen them as
Have you
3.
three? Yeah,
But
yeah.
really, I'm a registered nurse, but a lot of these children are very traumatized when they're removed.
Oh, absolutely.
You cannot remove a child from its home without him being traumatized.
Absolutely.
Right, that's an
And because of the
automatic
behaviors
response.
from the trauma, then they do get medicated and labeled special needs, and that's a shame.
Who allows the medication?
If they get medicated, so they don't say what.
What?
Given to the children.
Yeah, well, what happens, it would be the parent if they're involved. If not, it would be the Department of Family Services would be the one that would sign off, the nursing staff. What we're doing now is, I've got 350 children in the system that are on psychotropic medications. I'm going to review every one of those cases in the next month, May. I'm going to put 80 cases on, see what medications are on, why they're on that. And we've got a contract with Mojave Mental Health to review children around that to see why they're on it, should it be on, should get outside, because the people who prescribe those medications would be the hospitals that they're at.
Right.
There's a different, should they be making a determination, but the issue is you need the parents. You need someone there fighting for that kid, as I would with my kid. They want to put my son on psychotropic medication when he was younger. I said, I'm going to put him on it. What else can we do? But someone's got to be fighting. We're in their system. If the parents aren't out of the system, there's no one fighting for them.
But you do
A lot of
understand that there's
times-
an extra $2,000 per child.
A lot of
That
times-
are awarded to the counties and states for each child that is special needs. As soon as you got them on medicine, and most of the kids are ADHD, which is hard to prove one way or the other, it's an extra $2,000.
I'm ADHD. If you haven't figured out, I'm a little ADHD myself. I can find without meds.
The
And bipolar.
DFS, a lot of the times the parents allow the children to have medication because the DFS will say, this is what the child needs. So the parent really doesn't know
Right.
or doesn't understand, oh, well, okay, so, right. if
That's
you
back
refuse,
to
then
where
you
the
don't- they're not
parents need to be
compliant.
trained and know what's right and wrong.
Exactly, and and
The
have that
problem
in turn.
is the parents are in a lose situation. And so I'm glad that you're having this dialogue with us. I want to thank you for coming. Most of us here feel like we have been victimized unjustly by the system, and our children have been traumatized, and we're broken. We're brokenhearted, and we love our children. We don't want to see other families with the same type of pain that we've gone through. And so we do appreciate you coming and having a dialogue with us. But the odds are stacked against the parents. It is a lose, lose, lose situation. And anything you can do to help us, open up the dialogue with others, in the council that you were with today. I'm disappointed other judges wouldn't come and speak with us because they need to feel the pain that these families are going in. I'm sure you're a father, and a lot of them are fathers and mothers, and if they went and they lost their kids, were kidnapped, and then filtered through 5 to 6 to 12 different foster homes, or adopted out and never seen again, you can't even imagine the pain that the family, and this is a ripple effect on the society as a whole, and I've seen this firsthand just in Las Vegas alone, and from my research, it is a nationwide epidemic, really. But anyhow, thank you for coming and having this dialogue with us, and I hope you would encourage more judges and attorneys to also, let's reach out to each other, as in humanity, as real people. flesh and blood, you know, and stop the pain and the devastation of these families and these precious babies.
Well said, I can't say.
Teresa would like to say something.
How do you get other judges to listen, because they are making those decisions of destruction, and on the drug problem, they are medicating the children, that is clear. However, it's bigger than that, because then mom, grandma ends up medicated too.
As far as you gotta educate the judges, I'll be real honest. Judges are difficult to educate. 'Cause we're all knowledgeable. We're all, the worst CLE, I do a lot of talking to groups. The worst one I ever had was when I had a group of judges. We were trying to talk about domestic violence, and they were mandated to do 3 hours of domestic violence training by the Supreme Court. They were mad they had to do that, and while I was talking, they were reading a newspaper. It made it real obvious, you know, they would open a page and
Just didn't care.
rude, well, I'm a judge.
Yeah.
I'm a judge. How can you tell me anything? I'm all powerful knowledge. That's what we're
Yeah.
trying to teach them on it.
I'm untouchable.
Hang your robe. I call it robitis. It's an inflation of the ego caused by when you put on a black robe. And I said, remember where you came from and listen to people and come there. You can be trained on that. But that's a barrier we have. We do try to train the judges as to look for that, to identify those issues and look at that. But I think from the family side, the real key is getting committed juvenile judges. Juvenile judges at one time were considered, you're not a real judge. You've got criminal, civil judge, right? Criminal judge, civil up there. You got family judges, you couldn't be a real judge, and you got juvenile. Geez, you couldn't even make it to the family. And so you try to overcome that, because most of the ones would move on, because, you know, it's like a stepping stone on that, and it's, you know, and it's backwards, because to me, the most important judges, I mean that sincerely, are your family court judges.
Yes.
You're not going to come in contact, hopefully, with a criminal judge. I'm hoping. Hopefully, you won't come into contact with a civil judge for a lawsuit. But over 50–60% of people get divorced, so they're probably going to be in a family court judge. You've got guardianships, guardian ad litem. You've got juvenile justice. So the greatest likelihood is a family judge, if you ever go to court, and you vote for them, you don't know who the hell they are. Most of the people would never go down to the family court judge, and I said, that's the most important judge.
Yes.
And if you don't know about the person, then don't vote for either one of them. But don't sit there and say, oh, I like Sullivan, he's got a nice name, he's Irish. I had people vote for me because Sullivan's Irish. What the hell is that? I mean, seriously, and that's what they do. So learn your judges and do your background on them and see. And if they don't belong on there, don't vote for them, and tell your friends don't vote for them.
I'd like to make one comment. In terms of judges not being responsible for the decisions of the money that's being made, you know, if you start, judges are a part of the Legal and Bar Association. And so if you start looking at the direction of the Legal and Bar Association, who now is kind of infiltrated the legislature and who has infiltrated not only the courts, but are employed at all these different agencies, including and not limited to the Attorney General's office. So we have an entire legal system that is making decisions about where the money is going, and judges are a part of that legal system. At the University of Washington, for example, we were talking about the University of Washington. I took issue with their court improvement project at the University of Washington, because what they were doing is training the legal system on how to use psychology as a prosecution tool. Okay, it had nothing to do with defense in terms of court improvement. It was all about prosecution. So what I'm hoping with this focus on the judiciary is that the judiciary will take this and will have it filter into the Legal and Bar Association. But getting back into, we're talking about grassroots and lobbying, which is the topic of this program. Most people don't know that they can get involved in their bar associations. As a matter of fact, I started looking at some of the meetings, the public meetings that they were having, and I didn't see any family advocates there. They were all stakeholders that were there talking to the Bar Association about whatever issue they were presenting. And so it's really about us getting involved. You know, we are now horribly affected by the law. And the civil law, as I've been studying it, I'm just dumbfounded at what I'm reading and how it has cushioned itself, cushioned the government, and keeps the people abreast or away from them and having redress of grievances. And to the degree that it's, you know, I just can't believe I live in this country anymore. That I slept through the process. You know, I had to take personal responsibility for some of this, as do many of us, that we slept through this process, that we weren't paying attention to those bills going through, that we weren't reading the things that were being talked about within those open meetings. We weren't doing it. And that is our responsibility as citizens, to begin to engage ourselves in the whole political process and in the legal system. Like, you know, I now pay attention to those courtroom rules, you know, where I didn't before. Because I read those babies and say, you gotta be kidding, who came up with this?
And they're all public comment. I mean, and you're right, because there's some ones that make them, they're mean well, but they don't understand the ramifications of those rules sometimes, because you're looking up there, you don't see, especially if you've got Supreme Court making rules. They haven't been down in independency, so they might be making rules for that, but they haven't really been in there and really understand how it works. Everyone's a little bit different on it, but you're absolutely right, those are public comment, they're public opens, and what you see, it's tough to get the community involved. One of my biggest problems when I talk to groups is try to get some follow-up. Okay, where do you go from step on to make something happen? Because you'll have it like in this group. You'll have 4 or 5 worker bees that are the ones that make it happen. Some people come and go, but it's always the same 3, 4, or 5 people in the organization. You need more people to get involved. So if you can be in the organization, then be involved and get yourself involved, because it ain't going to change if you're not involved. Because you're right. Who's the most important stakeholders? The families. Who's there to make those decisions? We got family members trying to get children that were in the system, former foster care children, to be part of the solution, part of the committee. For a while, we even have foster children that have been through the system. How are we fixing the system? We don't even know people that went into it. Tell us your experiences on it. We're just starting to realize that those are the most important stakeholders of the families. So we need to integrate them into solution-oriented. How do we solve it? So
I want to touch again on the emotional distress, which leads to ultimate PTSD in a lot of these parents. Is what people don't understand, or maybe they don't care about, is that beginning the court process with juvenile dependency courts and CPS is psychologically, emotionally equal to the death penalty.
Yeah.
And being on death row. And
Yeah.
when your rights are terminated, it is equal to the loss by death of your child. But it's even worse, because although death is one of the worst things that can happen, you have closure. When your child is out there and you don't know if they're alive, if they know that you love them, if they're sick, are they being abused, you live it every single day.
Yeah.
So it's tragic.
Yeah.
Gentlemen,
Hi, my name is Samuel Nebraska, and my wife Elizabeth.
nice to meet you.
We raised 3 children, we were grandparents, but then our great niece was removed from the home of our niece. We took her in. A picture paints 1,000 words. This is Bella. Bella was with us for 20 minutes, but when the father got out of prison, he was able to do A, B, and C, and the court allowed him to be considered to have Bella back. He never knew Bella, he was in prison. But what happened was the judge at that time, in the abuse and neglect, said it had to be a therapist that would prevent little Bella from being traumatized. But we experienced the horror, you can imagine, hundreds and probably thousands of families have these stories of things that just don't add up. The judge had stated that this therapist was to ensure that Bella would not be harmed in any way and would ultimately have a chance to go with her biological father. And we accepted that. But then the Department of Family Services came to us after a session of therapy where we were going to go on a Christmas vacation. This is a year ago. And CFT had approved everything. Everything was okay. But what they did was they lied to us and said the father had a 1-hour visit before we left. We're able to get the child because we trusted the DFS. And when the child was in the father's hands, came back and told us, I'm sorry, but we had to lie to you because we were afraid that this father would not be able to say before the judge that the child was with him. So they traumatized little Bella. We saw her 4 days later for a 1-hour visit in Child Haven. And we were the only parents she ever knew. She was now drugged in a fog. And she had been crying and crying. So we had that one contact. She was not the same. We were horrified. And then through the course of presenting the facts to the judge stated it was unfortunate, it was water under the bridge. I know I said that if something happens to little Bella, I want to hear about it, but two wrongs don't make a right. And so ultimately, about 4 months later, this was Bella.
And that's very typical of a court.
And she had a permanent scar, and all the agencies, there was no accountability, and everybody involved was just trying to cover their butt and could care less about the facts. And so today, Bella is back with her biological father, who left the state without giving information to the mother of these children, our niece, of where they're at. We do not know exactly where in California. They're in Central California. That's as close as we've come. And we've endured this for 15 months. I appreciate the fact that you're here. You're probably the only judge that I've heard of that is willing to come, like you said, and be a liaison, you know? So I would ask you, is there, do you have office hours? Is there a time where we could simply, we're not trying to point a finger at any specific person, but we're trying to lay the facts out so that other children and parents don't have to experience the horror of what we've experienced and are continuing to endure.
Absolutely. What happens, if Miss Melody's willing to be, Miss Melody, I don't know if she's willing to be on that, the condo, if you want to meet with me, I cannot talk about cases that are pending before me, of course, ethically, but if you want to talk about, you know, system reform or things you had, the experiences on that, how the ball was dropped, or absolutely. Your case came complicated because you have parental rights, but the same token, that was a key decision. Before they uprooted that child's placement from you, they should have had a full hearing and make those findings with bonding and say, well, you got a father parental preference. Look at the bonding, how this child is bond, and with that, and the child went through that much on time, and then have the guts as a judge to say, wait a minute, I'm going to leave them with the grandparents and let them appeal it. And if the Supreme Court wants over, let them do it. Instead of, you know, parents got superior rights. But you weigh that out there, you do the bonding, you have to overcome that. But there's a way with findings, if they had a full evidentiary, make findings that could overcome that presumption, perhaps depending on the specific facts. I don't know if that happened in your case, or no, if they just said, Dad just gets him because he's dad, or they didn't go through.
Right. A lot of things were, for a person who had never been in the courts, but I'm a minister, and I worked at the trauma center in the 90s, trying to minimize trauma. I was unfathomable to me how all of these people, the family services, the court, all the partners, all the players were guilty here in this situation of letting this child become traumatized and a family. So,
We have a,
Does she have a question? This young lady have a question?
this
Absolutely.
is Bella's half-sister, by the way. This is Milani.
Well, I was in kindergarten. Took me away from my school. I didn't know where I was going. And then took me away to straight talk, and then I wasn't able to see my mom at all. And then when I came back with my aunt, my brother and sisters were with me, and then a few months later, they took my brother and sisters away from me, and then I wasn't able to see them, and then they left, and I didn't know what's going on. And then they just left to California, and then when I saw Bella, she had that scar, and then my brother Orlando, he had marks on him, he had bruises, and then I know they smoke over there and stuff, and they've been doing stuff to them, and it's been hurting me a lot, and I've been wanting to see them, but we had no contact with them, and we tried calling them, but they don't want to answer.
She hasn't seen her siblings in over a year.
Yeah.
Over a year.
We have.
She asked the CAP attorney to help, and nobody, nothing.
We have changed the law as far as recognized rights of siblings to maintain that sibling relationship.
But this is recently in court. This little girl asked the judge and the CAP attorney to visit with her sisters, and still Nothing.
They said it was out of
Nothing.
their jurisdiction.
It was out of their jurisdiction because they moved out of the state of Nevada. She's 11 years old, Your Honor.
Because
11.
we do sibling visitation plans. If they move out of state, it'd be tough for me to enforce it because they're not gonna extradite them back, to Nevada so I can hold them in contempt, but we do recognize the siblings because
Yeah,
of that
the
age of safety.
devastation of this little girl.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of guest speakers tonight, and so I think that we're probably going to cut off questions to the judge
I
at
would like
this
to say
point.
one thing to Judge Sullivan.
Well, we need to move on.
Just one thing, please, Jan.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, I would just like to, if you'd like to address any of these, one is, which I'm sure you see on an absolute daily basis, false allegations between parties, using the child, false allegations to further their court cases. Okay, the best interest of the child, which is clearly not clearly defined, which is why so often, any rulings, and I don't mean just by you, this is a nationwide thing, do not get overturned because that is so vast that the appellate court always says, well, they said in the best interest, but the best interest is not clearly defined. That's the second one. You can answer any of these or none of them, but I just want to jump in a couple of these here. Guardian ad litem, and this is a nationwide thing, and you may not even be aware of this, that guardian ad litems, court-appointed guardian ad litems, the parents cannot claim bankruptcy against their fees. They're supposed to, the Supreme Court actually has a cap of $1,000 on court guardian ad litem fees, but as you know, they file an affidavit with the judge stating that they, need more funds, but there's no second affidavit. So after the first affidavit, where you saying, okay, it's okay if they charge, over $1,000, there's no cap on the second. No one sees what happens after that $1,000. And I hate to throw personal stuff into it, but in my case, one child alone, a year and a half, over $129,000 in guardian ad litem fees alone. And that's not just me. I hear cases from, we're a national organization all over the country. People are paying $60,000, $70,000, $40,000 just for guardian ad litem fees. But after that first affidavit that you know about, that you sign, there's no second affidavit. And when it gets to $2,000, $4,000, nothing's to stop them. It's a free ride. No one oversees that. You don't see it. I'm sure you've never even questioned it. And I would hope that in the future, in cases that come to you, that you would find out what happens, when they're in that, what happens after that $1,000. And the last one, I can answer all of them or none of them. And the last one is the foster care, foster care are actually employees of the state. They are getting paid to do a job to take
$773 a month.
correct to take care of the children while during the period when the parents can't. But the foster parents, employees of the state, too often have rights over the parent in a court or the grandparents. Answer all of them, none of them, or I just want to
give them all answer in a minute. As far as your first question about false allegations, it happens all the time. You got to, as a judge, figure out credibility, what makes sense, and make findings of fact based on the information provided. Bad information, you get bad decisions. But they're always a question of fact because we get false allegations on domestic violence as well. You got to weed through it and make your findings based on the evidence. As far as best interest, it's very vague. I don't know how you can define it better, but you're right. This gives a lot of discretion to the judge on that. And I don't know how you define best interest. And we all say that. But you're absolutely right, but I don't know how you could define it better. I mean, maybe you could, maybe it's something the group comes up to, but it's real tough. How do you define the best interest? We look for emotional, bonding, things like that, but it's a real tough concept. I don't know if you could define it in black letter law that would make it better or not. The issues are the court making findings on why they think it's best for the child, so you could question that. The third one, our guardian ad litem do not get paid. Our guardian ad litem are CASAs. By statute, NRS 432B.500, they are not paid. Not all the kids have guardian ad litems. They have CASAs. We have 3,400 kids in the system. We only got 330 CASAs because I do the training for them. So the kids don't have guardian ad litems, which is one of the issues. We want a guardian ad litem for every child, but ours do not get paid. Our guardian ad litems, by statute, they cannot get paid.